9 years ago, the world lost a great priest and intellectual, the magisterial Father Richard John Neuhaus. Tonight, we'll honor his memory with some of his best moments from the show. And later, we'll recall one of the best voices of the golden age of entertainment, KEELY SMITH. She passed away just before Christmas at the age of 89. Coming up, my exclusive complete interview with the legendary singer. And finally, we'll get story-ended with Newberry Award winning children's author JERRY SPINELLI, all on this special edition of The World Over Live.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Tributes to Father Richard John Neuhaus, KEELY SMITH, and our story-ended interview with JERRY SPINELLI are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo, or you can drop us an email at worldover@ewtn.com. Let's get right to it. On January 8th, 2009, Father Richard John Neuhaus succumbed to an infection following a bout with cancer. There was only one Father Richard. His razor-sharp mind, his rumbling baritone, his wit, good cheer, and wonderful sense of humor were always combined with a deep and abiding faith. His death 9 years ago at the age of 72 was a great loss to the church and to intellectual life around the world. Though most of you knew Father principally as a guest on this program, I'm sure you felt like he was a friend, and he was. Over the years, we spoke to him about the latest Vatican news, his conversion to Catholicism, his own near-death experience, not to mention countless papal events. Here are some of the great moments we spent with Father Richard John Neuhaus. Here he is reflecting on the Catholic faith in America.
Catholic story was you came over as immigrants in the late 19th and early 20th century. Poor, downtrodden, no Irish need apply, etc., etc. Then in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, Catholics moved into the ascendancy. And then with the election of John F. Kennedy, Catholics were crowned in their full confidence of being thoroughly part of the American experience and believing that being Catholic and the American reality were perfectly compatible, that they fit together like hand and glove. So you didn't have to be identified as a Catholic in public. You didn't have to be assertive about it. Indeed, to be so would be bad manners, because it was just assumed that there was a neat fit between the American way of life, at which Catholics had succeeded so astonishingly, and being Catholic. It's only as our culture has increasingly fragmented and fallen apart and lost any kind of moral coherence or consensus that we realize that there's not a neat fit anymore automatically between being Catholic and being American.
Here's Father Neuhaus commenting on that. In 1990, he left the Lutheran faith to become a Roman Catholic, but not without some anguish. He had long held the dream that Michael just talked about, that Catholics and Lutherans would unite, but it was not to be.
It became evident to me in the mid and later 1980s that, sad to say, and I talk a little bit about that in the book, real Lutheranism, not my theological construction of Lutheranism or the theological construction shared by many other Lutheran clergy mainly who called themselves evangelical Catholic, but real on-the-ground Lutheranism had decided to be permanently a separated Protestant denomination. And meaning no offense to all my dear Lutheran friends who remain dear, dear brothers and sisters in Christ, I could not settle for anything less than the fullness of Catholic Christianity as embodied and most fully and rightly ordered through time in the Catholic Church. And so at that time, I realized that the dream that I had encouraged so many others to invest themselves in, and certainly in which I was deeply invested, that dream was, if not aborted, certainly delayed, even to the point of moving into the realm of eschatological hope. And I knew that I had to make the move. And in some way, as I say in the book, Raymond, you know, there's some of my Lutheran friends who say, Richard, you jumped the gun. You know, you were precipitous in what you did. Well, I was a Lutheran pastor and writer and theologian and for 30 years. I mean, so I gave it a pretty fair shot. 30 years is a long time.
I'll say. Here is Father reflecting on death and the life to come.
Everything has been faced that needs to be faced in order to live confidently and trustingly and lovingly. That in Jesus Christ, in God's revelation in Jesus Christ, the worst that could possibly happen has already happened in the death of Christ, when the darkness overcame the light. And so that when Christians say, this is not only for this book, but God willing, maybe for my life's ministry, if one could communicate this, and if I could more fully understand it and live it, that when, for example, Julian of Norwich says, all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well, that this is not optimism, this is not sentimentality, this is not some kind of idealistic dream. This is the simplicity that is on the far side of complexity. This is the life that is on the far side of death.
Despite the serious intellectual work undertaken by Father Neuhaus, he was personally the most delightful company you could imagine. During the long hours of our papal coverage, you often saw glimpses of his perceptive and occasionally cutting humor. Here we are, uncertain as to whether we have a pope or not in 2005. Afterwards is a clip of Father and I discussing the historic confusion. Watch for the cutting humor at the end. Bell sounds at St. Peter's. How is one to distinguish between the bells of confirmation and the bells tolling the 15 minutes have passed? So we wait. Yes. I'm as frustrated as you are, if not more frustrated. So just hang tight. We'll have some confirmation in the coming moments, I hope.
If our Lord had entrusted the church to angels, we wouldn't have this trouble. But there are bells. That is not the 6 o'clock bell.
No.
That's
from the local church over here.
Well, that was the word was that as soon as the word went out from the Holy See, all the churches of Rome would start ringing their bells.
Right.
Are we going to hear that?
But the question I had when I heard that initially is how,
who's going to let them know?
How are all these little pastors spread throughout Rome to know when the world's media spending millions and with jumping on top of Navarro vowels at this hour?
Raymond, at the risk of interrupting our chatter, it seems to me now that we have to say, Habemus Papam, we have a pope. The smoke is white.
No, there's no one is confirming this yet, and we will not either, Father. You can say that.
What? Okay, no, I'm
We have confirmation. It appears we do have a new pope.
It appears.
Habemus Papam.
Habemus Papam, as best we can tell.
Habemus Papam.
Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger is the 265th Pope, the 264th successor to St. Peter. And there it is, the great moment. Once again, you scooped me.
But then you notice I qualified it toward the end.
Yes, I did notice that little wiggle room you put in there, exactly. Near as we can tell.
That's the kind of fellow I am. I just... I don't like to take, as the recently retired Cardinal Archbishop of Washington explained the other day that on NPR, that's my idea of leadership, is that you walk right down the middle of every issue. So I quote, apparently some people find this amusing. I don't know. I'm simply quoting.
I haven't practiced mine.
I'm simply quoting His Eminence, who said that he learned this when Pope John Paul visited Newark, and then McCarrick was the Archbishop of Newark, And he noticed that the Holy Father walked right down the middle of the aisle so that the people on the left and on the right could both relate to him. And he was solidly in the middle. Now, I think this was, on the part of His Eminence, a rather unique contribution to the understanding of the character and person and pontificate of John Paul II.
Really?
That he was a man who refused to take sides.
A man of the middle.
And
that's your path as well.
That's my trajectory through life.
Here is one last bite from our friend. For all of you who might be struggling with illness or facing death, here's Father Neuhaus reflecting on his brush with death in 1993.
Through these series of operations and medical missteps and
right.
is that I'm not in control, and that's a very good thing. That there is a surrender. There is a surrender that is not simply resignation. It's not simply shrugging your shoulders, but it is a surrender of discovery, of discovering that there is a control, there is a power, there is an intentionality that can be absolutely trusted. And in the deepest darkness, there is finally no reason to fear that even at the heart of darkness is hope, because at the heart of darkness is Christ.
How I miss my dear friend. May Father Richard John Neuhaus rest in peace. When we return, we'll remember a singing legend, my complete classic interview with Keely Smith. When the World Over continues, stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. Last year, we lost so many great entertainers, Hollywood legends like Don Rickles and Jerry Lewis. And on December 16th, we lost a woman who was such a part of our annual Christmas show, the incomparable Keely Smith. She was 89. Keely and her husband, Louis Prima, lit up Vegas in the 1950s, conquering the Billboard charts and winning a Grammy for their That Old Black Magic. Her career spanned over 70 years. I spoke with her near her home in Palm Springs, California. Now, we've aired a piece of this interview, but it has not aired in its entirety since our first broadcast of it. Here's my interview with Keely Smith. Keely, you've been singing since 6 years old? Around the house?
In the bed, mainly.
Really?
Actually, the first time that my mother woke me up, I was standing up in the middle of the bed. I slept with her, singing at the top of my lungs.
Wow.
And I was about 6 years old then.
Did your mom and dad sing?
No. My dad was a carpenter. My mother played the piano in the church, but she never sang.
Huh. And in 1947, you and your family go to Atlantic City.
Yes.
And you see this fellow, Louis Prima.
Right.
Did you know him before you saw him?
I never even heard of him.
Really?
No. And my brother Pig and I were real jitterbug nuts. And we were looking forward to going to the Steel Pier to see the big band, and there's this big sign up, Louis Prima. And I looked at my brother and I said, well, who in the world is that? So we went out there to see who it was, and my mom and dad went with us everywhere, and I had a little brother in those days. He was about 4 years old. Huh. And we went out there, and at one end of the ballroom is this bandstand with this band and about 200 people standing around it, and in the back of the ballroom, the people were actually dancing. And I thought, well, what in the world's going on up there on that stage, right? So I took my little brother in my arms, because it always got me to the front of the bus or the front of everything, right? And I got up there, and I standing there, and I see this man, and I thought, my goodness, where did he come from? He was wonderful. You couldn't take your eyes off of him. And he had a group within the orchestra called the Goofers, and they were doing Italian comedy. And they were absolutely wonderful. He had a singer named Kathy Allen. She was wonderful. I mean, I never danced. I stood there the whole time watching the show. That's how good he was.
Wow. And then later he comes to your neck of the woods.
Actually, we went back to Virginia. As you know, I was born and raised in Norfolk. And we have a beautiful beach area called Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Sure.
And there was a club down there called the Surf Club. And each week, the owner, Mr. Kane, would bring in a different big band. And we went to Mr. Kane and told him, you've got to bring in Louis Prima next summer. He said, who is Louis Prima? And again, it's in our neck of the woods. We just never heard of him or his recordings. And luckily for us, Mr. Kane listened to us. And we told him, we said, if you bring him in, we'll pack this place for you on his opening night. Mr. Prima will pack it the rest of the time. And he brought him in, and sure enough, opening night, you couldn't move in there. And Louis was so great. And he packed the place the rest of the time.
And you soon joined his band. He hires you at 20?
I joined him. He opened on a Friday. I joined him on a Sunday. I went up and sang a couple of songs for him on Sunday. He was looking for a singer. I went to work with him that night. The only thing I had to wear was my prom high school dress. But what Louis didn't know, which was so good for me, is that after I had seen him in Atlantic City, when I went home to Virginia, I bought every Louis Prima record I could find. And I knew all of the vocals. I knew the entrances, the endings, and the whole thing, so they really didn't have to teach me hardly anything.
Wow.
And I left with him the following Thursday.
Now this act was something. I mean, the two of you. You had the sort of deadpan...
But not in those days. In those days, I was just a band singer.
So he would just bring you on for
And
part.
Louis always worked with a girl. He always played off of a female singer.
Right.
And he used to like really tall, he had one called Florida Keys, and she was tall, black-haired. And all of his singers, he wanted to be black-haired too. And so the girl singer was important to Louis because, like I said, he worked off of her. But in the days of the big band, that I would sit in the chair.
Right.
And then I'd get up and I'd do my song, or I'd do a duet with him or whatever, and I'd still go back and sit in the chair.
Right.
Then after the big band died down and there was no more work for the big band, he and I went out, just the two of us, in a duo. And naturally, I became more important to him as it went along because he only had me. There was nobody else for him to work off
But this
of.
chemistry was unbelievable because it was, he would jump around and just be madcap, out of control, maniacal at times. And you just stood there, placid as could be, at times bored.
I was. I really was. You know, it's funny because if you look back at some of the old tapes, especially the Ed Sullivan things,
right, that's
I used to laugh a lot. Nobody ever saw me laugh. And when we went to the Sahara is really when the deadpan thing happened. And it was an accident. It wasn't something that was planned. It wasn't something that I think I could have done if I tried to do it intentionally. And it was, we worked from midnight till 6 in the morning. We did 5 shows a night.
Wow.
And the first half hour of each show, I had nothing to do but to stand there. And I wasn't a hand clapper, I wasn't a finger snapper. And we had a very small stage. And I stood in front of the upright piano and I would cross my arms in front of my chest like this. I'd lean up against the piano and I'd stand there for a half hour. But in the Sahara Lounge, I could see people coming in the main front door. I could see them coming in and out of the main showroom. I could see them coming in and out of the side door. And I was so busy doing what I call being nosy, watching everything and everybody, that when Louis would come over and pull on my skirt, he really was interrupting my chain of thought, you know. And I would look at him like, leave me alone, you know, what are you doing here? And it turned into something wonderful.
Wow. What was the source of that chemistry? Because he never could recapture that without you.
No, he couldn't. I truly believe it was the fact that we loved each other and we were married. And we could get away with things on stage being married. Another thing I think was very important, which I still dress like it today, any gown I wear on stage, any girl can go buy in a store. I don't wear very, very expensive clothes. I always used to think that we belonged to the people. Everybody in town, we belong to the people. And I really think that's what our success was.
What did you learn from him as a performer?
I learned a lot. I learned pacing of a show. Never do an encore. I don't ever do an encore.
Wow. Why wouldn't he do encores?
He said that once you walk off the stage, leave them wanting more. Don't ever go back and overdo, and don't ever milk an audience. You've seen many performers say, do you want one more? Or they'll run off and they'll kind of look and, one more. And he said, don't ever do anything like that, you know. And, but pacing a show, I think, was the most important.
You've worked and up on that stage with you throughout the years. Elvis, Sammy Davis Jr., Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra. Are you ever in awe that that happened to you?
Oh, golly, yes. I wasn't in awe of Frank I was deathly afraid of him at one point, but I wasn't in awe of him. Dean was so easy to be with. That Dean, you just became friends with Dean right off the bat. Sammy, I knew when Louis had the big band, we worked all of the black theaters back east.
Right.
And we used to work the Apollo Theater a lot in Harlem. Wow. And Sammy was working with his uncle and his father.
The Will Masterson.
So I knew Sammy for many, many years before we ever hit Las Vegas. Wow. And of course, Elvis was a very nice young man. There was nothing to be in awe of him about.
Did you ever think, why me? How did I get thrown into this?
No, because I think God does everything. I am very close to God. I talk to him all the time. He's with me everywhere I go. And I truly believe he has a plan for you. He has one for me. He has one for whoever in this world. And it was his plan. And even today, if I'm not sure about something, I ask for guidance. I just tell him, give me, let me make the right decisions.
Wow. Did you always feel that divine nudge, if you will, moving you along from the time
Sometimes on stage, if I would get upset over something or I'd get nervous, I'd just kind of look up there and just a calmness would come over me and I'd just continue. I've never questioned things. I still don't question them. I don't question why somebody like Britney Spears goes from this beautiful young thing to this whatever she is now. I don't know why people did that with her, because she is absolutely a lovely young girl. I don't question why Diana Krall is the biggest thing in jazz in the world. I mean, I'm happy for them. I think it's great. I don't question what makes the grass green. And a lot of people I know do question everything. And I just figure I put my life in God's hands. And whatever he intends for me to do or be or go or say or whatever is going to happen.
You pray regularly?
Yes, I do.
You told me something the other day, that when you were singing, you had a little frog in your throat.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
That happened just the other night. I've been fighting catching some kind of a bug, and I've been taking antibiotics. And I told him, I said, dear God, if you're going to let me get sick, please can it wait till Sunday? Don't let me get sick on Friday and Saturday, because I've got these 2 shows. But anyhow, on Saturday night, I guess I had gotten a little tired, and some phlegm came across my throat on the next to last song, closing. And I managed to get through that song, and the closing song is The House I Live In, coupled with a portion of the Star Spangled Banner. And The House I Live In, I got through it. It was, coughing here and there and trying to clear it. For some strange reason, the minute I started singing the Star Spangled Banner, it cleared up like it had never been there, like a bell. Wow. And I finished the song the way I was supposed to be singing it, So,
when you were in the middle of this, it had to be an exciting time, but doing 5 and 6 shows a night, I'm sure you weren't aware that you were essentially creating the Lounge Act, as it would come to be known.
I wasn't aware. See, when we went into Vegas, Mary Kay Trio was the big lounge act in there, and they were wonderful. Mary Kay was a great singer. And we kind of took over their spot, so to speak. So no, I wasn't aware we were creating a lounge act. I didn't even know how big we were. I never realized that we were stars,
Wow.
Because we did what we did. I was married, I had my children. We went to work, he got up and played golf, I stayed with the kids all day, and that was my life.
Your life. Compare that era to today, where we are.
Oh, there'll never be an era like that. Never, ever.
Why
ever
not?
Again. The people are gone. There'll never be another Frank Sinatra. There'll never be another Nat King Cole. There'll probably never ever be another Elvis. I'm trying to think. Now, Shecky Green, thank God, is still alive, and he's still wonderful. Don Rickles is still alive and working. Yes, he is. And but it wasn't just the individual artist. It was the friendship that we had. If someone got sick, like I remember one time, Frank was supposed to open at the Sands, and we were opening the following night at the Sahara. And Jack Entrada at the Sands called Louis and said, could you please open tonight for Frank? He can't make the show. And we've got a full house. And Louis said, of course. Never thinking or never saying, well, golly, that might take something away from our own opening. Louis just said, babe, we're going to fill in for Frank tonight. I said, fine. So we went up there, and they put a sign at the door, Frank Sinatra will not be appearing tonight, but Louis Prima and Keely Smith will. And to give the people the chance to leave if they wanted to or get their money back. And you never looked for any pay or a gift or a thank you. You just did it because you were friends. That's gone. That's not in our business anymore.
What do you think about the moral and cultural climate of that time as compared to today? Do you think we're headed in the right direction today?
No, not at all. Are you kidding? No. I don't believe in free sex and the language they're using today, especially on records and on television. No, I'm dead set against all of that.
How did we get here?
I have no idea. You know, I sometimes have to laugh because I read things in the paper about school teachers being blamed for the kids doing this and the kids doing that. Well, heck, it begins at home. Those teachers can't do it alone. The parents have to discipline these children.
Do you think there's been a decrease on the emphasis on morality and personal morality and religious faith?
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons that I love George Bush so much. I think President Bush has brought back to the White House our dignity, our morality, our religion, and family. I really do.
And that's so needed now.
Yes, it is. Yes, our country needs the family to be together again.
I want to take you back again and talk about your solo career for a minute after Louis Prima. You work with Nelson Riddle and Billy May. I mean, some of the greatest arrangers, and those albums still are like the day they were cut. What memories do you have of working, particularly with Riddle?
Nelson was wonderful. Nelson was very quiet. And of course, I got Nelson because of Frank. And I don't know if you know the story or not about my contract with Capitol Records. They didn't want me at all. They wanted Louis in the group and me as part of the group, but they didn't want me. And Louis had told them, we'll sign with you, but you've got to give Keely her own individual contract. And they said, no, we don't want her. And Louis said, well, then you can't have the group. And they hemmed and hawed, and they came back in about 3 months, and they said, okay, we'll take her. And that's how I got my contract. And my first CD or album in those days was I Wish You Love, which was recorded with Nelson. You know. And I got Nelson because of Frank. Because everybody didn't get Nelson.
No, I noticed that. You, Nat King Cole, Judy Garland, and Sinatra. That was it.
Yeah.
What a group.
Yeah.
You said in an interview we did once before, God would lead me where I needed to go. Did you always feel that, even at that time?
Yeah, always. Oh, since I'm a kid, yeah.
Wow.
Since I'm very young.
I want to talk about that voice of yours. Here are some reviews. New York Times from this year. Miss Smith's warm, molasses-textured voice is remarkably intact. Here's the Los Angeles Times. Her voice has lost none of its honeyed warmth and creamy luster. Here's one more. Her timeless tone intact, Smith can still caress a ballad and wail on a beat with a control eclipsing her younger peers.
I ain't ought to pass her twice just because she is so nice, Angelina. Angelina, the waitress at the pizzeria. I keep soup and minestrone just to be with her alone, Angelina. Angelina, the waitress at the pizzeria. For your Benny. Angelina, I adore you.
What is the secret to this voice?
Well,
you've got to work at it.
No, I don't. I truly don't. I've never had a lesson. If I'm going to go to work, I rehearse about 2 weeks ahead of time. If I'm going to record, I rehearse about a month ahead, learning the songs. But I've never abused it either. I've never smoked. I drank very little in my life. I've never been into drugs of any kind. And other than eating a lot of pasta, I eat very healthy, you know.
Well, maybe that's what keeps that voice intact.
I don't know.
Now, I hope I'm not breaking a confidence here. You are 74 years old.
Yes.
Voices like this don't come out of 74-year-old bodies. I've got to tell you.
They do if God's leading them. And I don't mean to sound overly religious. You know, I just feel that He's with me all the time.
Okay.
But I truly believe it is a God-given thing because I didn't have to work at it. I've been very blessed with it. And like I said, I don't abuse it.
And you don't work it out? You don't do vocalises every day?
No.
You don't take lessons?
No.
Breath control?
And I can't read music.
Do you work out, exercise to keep the breath control?
No.
How do you maintain it? I mean, it really, I've got to tell you, I've been seeing you for almost about 15 years now live. It's frightening to me. You sound like you did in 1954.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with being happy, too. I really do. I lead a pretty normal life. I'm not your typical show business person.
What do you say to those who feel they're over the hill? And there's a lot of people. I mean, you're a pretty spunky number. And you're still recording, Grammy nominations.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you're still out there. What do you say to those people?
Get off your rear and go do it. I mean, I have a friend here in town, and I won't say his name, and I adore him, and he was one of the biggest, a part of one of the biggest acts in the world at one time. And he thinks he's over the hill. He thinks he can't sing anymore. And he is the sweetest, kindest man. And I tell him it's a muscle. That's all it is. It's a muscle. You let your muscles go in your entire body, everything's going to fall apart. You let your muscle go in your throat, you have to work at it. You've got to build the muscle back up, and you can sing.
Right, right. Gap ad hits in 1998. Kids are suddenly listening to Jump, Jive, and Wail, and Keely Smith is everywhere. What do you think drew them to that song and to you again? I mean, I go to your concerts. You've got kids in the aisles.
Isn't that wonderful?
What is drawing them?
The beat, the music. Louis had that shuffle rhythm, and I incorporate that in a lot of my music. And as you well know from singing the shows, I do a lot of Louis songs.
Right, right.
But I think it's the rhythm, and the people walk out of there happy. And I think that's the whole thing. When you do a Sinatra show and you end a concert with My Way, I mean, that's really a downer, but it's such a blockbuster of a song that you don't lose the people with it.
Right.
But when you walk out of there singing When the Saints Go Marching In, and you got the whole room singing with you, and people walk out happy and dancing, and that's really what I like.
Yeah, well, you can see it, and it exudes out into the streets. I mean, after Feinstein's, the night I saw you at Feinstein's in New York, you know, you had people in walkers jumping up and down. I mean, it's amazing. How have you been able to survive where other groups that came out of the swing craze from like 1995 to the present, a lot of these groups have dropped off, and you're still here?
I don't know. I never thought of that.
Is there an authenticity? Do you think it's because you're the real deal?
Probably. Probably. And the fact that the voice is still there. You know. But again, I think it's positive thinking, you know, the way I live, the way I think positive all the time. I refuse to think negative. And I'm interested in a lot of things. You know, I want to learn Spanish. I still don't have a computer.
You're going to get
one. I'm really behind time with that. But yeah, I am going to get a computer. I don't have time to learn to work one yet, so.
You've got a 5-record deal from Concord.
Yes.
You've done the Swing, Swing, Swing tribute to Louis Prima.
Right.
You've done the tribute to Sinatra. You now have a tribute to Count Basie. Keely swings Basie style. Talk to me about that. Why Count Basie?
Well, I worked with Basie. I was the first singer that took him into Basin Street East in 1963. That was way ahead of Frank taking him into the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas. And Bobby Milano, who is my record producer, thought that I should. Bobby believes bigger is better. I believe simple is better. Less is better to me. Bigger is better to him. And he said, you can't come along after the Sinatra CD with 40-some-odd musicians and do something with 8 or 9 guys, because I wanted to do a mood thing called In the Keely Mood and just sing some pretty songs. He said, Keely, I really don't think that's going to work. He said, you were close with Basie. Why don't you do a tribute to him? And I did like that idea.
Wow.
So I worked with Basie, like I said, in New York at Basin Street East, and I took him to Los Angeles, to the Coconut Grove in the Ambassador Hotel.
Right.
And then we did some armed services radio shows together.
I have that, I have that on CD.
That's terrible, isn't it?
Well, no, it is not terrible.
How do you like the hair on the cover?
Yeah, that's an old picture. Where did they find that picture?
That's what I looked like when I left home with Louis. I had long hair.
Wow. Yeah. It's a great recording, though, because it's live. I mean, it's pseudo live.
Yeah.
It's a great pairing. This past October, you were awarded the highest honor granted by the Cherokee Nation. What did that mean to you?
A lot. And I think more so because even though I'm from the South, I was never raised with prejudice of any kind. And when I first left home with Louis, and I did my first newspaper interview, the man asked me what my nationality was, and I said English, Irish, and Indian. And he said, what kind of Indian? I said, Cherokee. And I was so proud of this interview, I sent a copy of it home to my mother, and she had a fit. She said, oh, why did you do this? I said, what, Mom? What are you talking about? Well, you don't ever admit that you're part Indian. I said, why not? She said, because you just don't. That's a no-no. That's a minority. I said to her, but I'm very proud. This, now, my Indian part is not on my mother's side, naturally.
Ah, it's on your
father's side.
It's on my father's
side.
Okay.
My grandma was full-blooded Cherokee, and my grandfather was three-quarters.
Wow.
And so anyhow, I told her, I said, well, I'm very proud of it, and I will always mention the fact that that's my heritage. And because of that, the Cherokee Nation came along and recognized me for being proud of the fact that I was part Cherokee.
Wow. Thank you so much. What a talent. When we return, our story-oriented segment, award-winning kids author Jerry Spinelli is here, and we'll talk about how to get your kids hooked on reading. The World Over continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over and our story-ended segment where we talk to some of the best authors anywhere. He is the best-selling writer of over 36 novels for children and young readers, including the Newberry Award-winning Maniac McGee. I spoke with him about the source of some of his best-loved stories, tips for getting your kids to read, and his book, The Warden's Daughter. Here's my interview with Jerry Spinelli. Jerry, you initially wrote for adults. You didn't intend to write for kids. Tell us how this happened.
I had written 4 books that nobody wanted over a period of about 15 years.
Wow.
Started in on book number 5, thanks to one of my kids who stole my lunch one day out of the refrigerator, and I started writing something about that at work that day. To the extent that a non-published author can be audacious enough to imagine an audience, I imagined an audience of somebody like people like you and me reading it, because I thought, thinking back on the life of a 13-year-old kid, I thought it was funny and interesting, and I thought folks like us would find it interesting to go back and look at that. But when my agent went to sell it to publishers, they told her, well, this is about a kid. Adults won't read a kid's book. You're going to have to peddle this to the juvenile divisions, which is what she did, and that's where I landed, and I've been there ever since.
Wow. Where did that character come from? I remember Jason. I read that book. It was Space Station 7th grade.
That's right. Yes.
Why is that your favorite book?
I'd say it's my co-favorite.
Okay.
I guess because it's my first published.
Yeah.
And when you consider that it came along 25 years, a quarter of a century after I decided I wanted to be a writer, that was pretty meaningful. So my first baby, my co-favorite, yes.
Yeah. What's your favorite?
Well, I'd say along with that, I'd name Maniac McGee.
Yeah, and we'll talk about him in a moment, because that's such a favorite, I know, to everyone watching, and certainly to this guy. Many of your books, so many of them, right down to your most recent, The Warden's Daughter, they really do touch on lived experience and really universal memories. How much of it do you rely on your own memories or those of your children?
I would say a lot, particularly myself.
Really?
That's what I do. People assume, considering the number of kids and grandkids that we have, 6 kids, 30 grandkids, that I must be using them for source material all the time.
Right.
But in fact, more often than not, it's myself. I remember things. I remember giving my first public talk, and somebody in the audience raised a hand and said, how do you remember all this stuff? And that was my first indication that apparently not everyone does. I thought it was common.
Right.
I thought we all carry this stuff around like an addict. But I don't always remember what I did or said, but I often remember my reactions to things. I remember how I felt about things. Yeah. And so I'm constantly mining my own memories.
Wow. I am amazed, I have to tell you. That was the thing. In fact, I made a note about it. How do you recall this? You know, when I read that you mine your own memories for so many of these characters, some of their reaction and the situations they find themselves in, I was thinking, I can't remember those. It is a rare gift.
Maybe it is, and for that I'm thankful. It's given me a career. I remember getting a letter from a kid in the 90s. He said, Jason is just like me.
Yeah.
How do you know what I think? And I wanted to tell the kid, and here it goes back to the question, kids don't change. Their haircuts change, their sneakers cost more, and so forth.
Yeah.
But a kid when I was growing up in the 50s and a kid today they still have the same feelings, the same situations. A kid is a kid. There's the eternal kid. That doesn't change. And so if I'm going back and mining myself at the same time, I'm mining us all, the eternal kid.
In 1989, you make a pretty major decision in your life to write full-time.
Yes.
You quit your day job and you do this. There was a lot of hardship for a while there financially.
Yeah.
How hard was that for your family? You had 6 children.
Yeah, it was scary. I was out of work only for about a year, and I was beginning to look at the one ads because I didn't think we were going to be able to make it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what made you stick to it? I mean, you were already, I imagine, writing about this character, Jeffrey Lionel McGee, who would become Maniac McGee.
Yes, and that book was not setting the world on fire. But then you say, what happened?
Yeah, tell us what happened.
A phone call happened at midnight. And my wife and I are asleep. I hear the phone ringing in the hallway. I don't want to answer it. When's the last time you got good news at midnight over the phone? So I answered it, and there was somebody on the end of the line telling me that they were careful not to get the facts mixed up with the truth, which I recognized as a line from the beginning of Maniac McGee.
Right.
And it turns out that some folks in a hotel room in Chicago had cast a vote, and Maniac McGee was the winner. And so first thing I knew was that I didn't need to go back to work. My work now
was writing.
Once and forever was going to be writing.
And
yes.
you were a Newbery Honor winner.
Yeah, well, Newbery Medal winner is what they called it. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Tell me about that story, because it's a beautiful sort of fable about that engages racism. And the story of this boy alone, finding his way, being adopted, if you will, temporarily by various families. Where did this story find its germ?
It's hard to say. I wrote 80 pages of it, tossed them away, wrote 100 more, tossed them away, and really I couldn't zero in on it. I think I wanted to write about a kid who was a hero to other kids. And more than anything else, first, there was the memory of a song. Now, you're way too young to remember this. Late 50s, early 60s, Martha and the Vandellas, Dancing in the Street.
Right.
Well-known a song. That always affected me, the vision of that song suggests. Everyone, all kinds, all colors, all backgrounds, dancing together in the street. And I think I wanted to write a book that would deliver a vision like that. So I think that more than anything, and then deciding after those 2 strikes that to make Maniac, to focus it in on the black-white issue more than anything else. And once I began to focus in on it, I was visited by the Muse. I wasn't sure I believed in the Muse, speaking of belief. Didn't know I believed in the Muse until it visited me. One night I'm there not even thinking about it because I had the 2 flame outs, and I figured, well, okay, I'm going to turn my back on this book for a couple of days. And sometimes, as you know, that's when things happen.
Yeah, it starts crackling. You hear it in the bathtub. You hear it when you're walking the dog.
And what I heard in my ear one night was they say Maniac McGee was born in a dump. I wasn't reaching for that sentence. I wasn't thinking about the book at all. Those words just popped from nowhere into my head. And I went on and wrote a couple of paragraphs, showed them to Eileen, and she said, that's it. And the book was on its way.
Maniac Magee is set in a town called Two Mills.
Yes.
In some of the writing and reportage I've seen, this town is sort of based on your childhood, Norristown.
Yes.
Where you grew up.
Yes.
Two Mills was the setting for Maniac Magee. It is also the setting of your newest book, The Warden's Daughter. Why did you return to Two Mills, and why did you call it Two Mills?
Because it's where I grow up, and as you know, what piece of advice to young aspiring writers is more common than write what you know.
Right.
So it just feels natural and comfortable for me to return to that setting.
Let's talk, there's some story-oriented questions I ask every author that comes here. Your favorite children's book and why?
That would be When You Are Happy. You may not be familiar with it. I'll tell you who wrote it, the person I live with, Eileen Spinelli. And I consider it the world's most beautiful book. It hits my trifecta for text, illustration, and message. I challenge anybody to show me another book where so much humanity is packed into so few pages. It's a 32-page picture book, and it's beautiful, and I believe it should be in everyone's home in this country. And so that wins my vote, hands down.
What's your least favorite book?
I'm trying to think. I'm not coming up with it.
You're not coming. You see, the writers always have problems with the least favorite.
Yeah.
For me, it's, you know, the big monster pieces.
You know, give me time enough, and I'd come up with.
See, I'm not a James Joyce fan. I don't like James Joyce. I cannot read Joyce anymore. I just I find that torturous.
Yeah, I took a shot. Maybe that's my least favorite book, Finnegan's Wake.
I'm with you.
You're talking to somebody who actually read 30 pages of it.
Oh, well, you see, you got through more than me.
Finnegan's Wake, I dare you to get through a paragraph.
Right.
So I'm proud of those 30 pages.
You see, but we agree. I'm glad we agree on the least favorite. What is the story that helped you find your way and the lesson you derived from it?
Believe it or not, I think it was the first story that meant something to me, and that was my mother reading it to me, and that was Babar the Elephant.
Oh.
And of course, I didn't understand what it meant to me or how it may have affected me till many years later. It's the story that has a sad ending, you know, of an elephant dying. But I kept asking my mother to keep reading it to me night after night. And then now I ask myself, why did I do that? I'm as sad as it was, and it made me cry every time. I must have been getting something out of it. And I finally figured it. What I was getting out of it was it was making me feel somehow. It was drawing a reaction out of me. It was touching my heart. And what I learned from it was the power of a story.
Where do you write and why?
I have written in many places. I have written, as one writer says, in the cracks. When you have a family like I did, a job, several part-time jobs, you learn to write in the cracks of time.
Right.
Now I'm happy to say that things have gone well enough that now my office, my desk is here, and I'm looking out big picture window, and then a few yards of land and a lake. I mean, I see deer walk by, groundhogs, an eagle.
Life moving.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to parents who have children who are reluctant readers?
You can put in front of them a book that they can relate to. Take Silas Marner away. Go to the library, talk to the children's librarian, let them recommend something that your kid can relate to. A life of a character that in some way resembles your kid's life.
Final question on this book. What do you hope people take from it, and why did you write it?
Beyond the fact that Ellen Adams gave me the spine of a good story,
I'll say,
what I found there was an opportunity to tell the story of someone who is a quiet hero. They're all around us. We see them all the time. We interact with folks doing wonderful things that nobody knows about. They're getting no trophies.
Right.
They're getting no headlines. Nobody knows about it, but they're sacrificing themselves, and often as not, they're doing so on our behalf, and we don't even know it. And such a situation occurs with Cammie and her inmate housekeeper, Elota Popko.
No, it's a beautiful story, and thank you for sacrificing for all these years for so many. What an impact you've had. Thank you. Jerry Spinelli's latest novel, The Warden's Daughter, is available now in bookstores everywhere and online. Well, that is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. Don't miss next week's show. Some special guests. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.